treading water in the early going is, the field is so tough. If you can avoid those really, really disastrous days, you're still going to set yourself up into a position where you can draw really well, run the table on one of those pivotal days, go 6-1. You're going to have some days where you go 4-3, or maybe even 3-4, as long as you can avoid those super negative days. That's what you're looking for as a top player in this field. There are so many good players competing here that it's almost inevitable that there's going to be some parity in the standings. It's going to be very difficult for one player to run away with this. And that makes this game a little bit, makes this game kind of pivotal, just because, the difference between 5-3 and 4-4 feels a little bit bigger than it actually is. But either way, as you said, Sam, it is just one game, and hopefully it's a great one between these two really strong players. So here we go. Dave going first. Let's see what he pulls.
All right, it's a bit of a mixed rack. He's got some good tiles for a bingo. Oh,
Yeah,
got those double eyes.
Yeah. So he is the way he laid his tiles out suggests that he realized that if he could just turn that I, one of those two I's, into a G, he would have his own name. He spelled out the anagram of his name, Windage, except with that I in place of where he wished the G was. That would be a pretty epic moment on stream, Sam, if Dave opened with the anagram of his last name.
Yeah, he does have a relatively high probability set of 7 letters as his last name, and with those two bingos, one Collins only. He's going with Wade, sort of an obsolete or archaic past tense, I believe, of the word weigh, to weigh something, WEIGH. So seems like a good play to me. Using that double I is important. Plopping that W on the double letter score. So seems natural. What do you think, Will?
Yeah, that's a good play. He had a slight imbalance in favor of vowels, so using 3 vowels in 2 of his consonants, including the W in just the right spot, leaving IN, which is a great 2-tile combination for next turn. All looks good to me. Pretty standard stuff from him. Dave Wiegand hasn't drawn very well to that IN with the HV combination, but Whitley has his own problems with all those E's and the WK on his rack. Oddly, it looks like Dave did right to play his W and a bunch of other tiles, leaving IN. It looks like David Whitley can do the same with the play of weak with that extra E at the end, right on top of Wade with all those overlaps for 34 points, also leaving IN. It looks like he sees it.
Yeah, it's showing some good word knowledge, certainly showing that he has command of some of these obscure Collins-only 5-letter words. I believe Whitley has been playing the Collins lexicon for a while now, relatively speaking. I mean, of course, it's only, as most, as many American or North American players will know, the Collins lexicon wasn't really in wide usage in this, in the States and in Canada until maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago. So, but I think he was a relatively early adopter, and that looks like a strong play using all those overlaps, and not being afraid to shed that extra E when you're going to get 6 extra points from it. It's going to be worth it. Of course, though, he's not really rewarded drawing letters of onion to his. He already had an in, and now he's got another in. So meanwhile,
that's a brutal draw.
Yeah, it is. Wiegand, he does have a tougher rack, but he's got that S to balance it out, though the S isn't super useful yet because, relatively speaking, because Wade doesn't take an S on the end. And it looks like he's considering vor, which I guess would play atop the WE of weak and make some nice overlaps and score decently, keeping sort of balancing his leave. The V is kind of the clunkiest tile that he has, so he'd love to use it for some points.
There it is.
For this play, Will.
I like it. I mean, in a vacuum, you might prefer to keep your R. It's such a nice tile to mesh with a bunch of other good bingo tiles. But at the same time, you're scoring 25 points and leaving a pretty synergistic combination left over on the rack. So it makes a lot of sense. And there's a bingo finding its way onto Dave's rack of Banshee with a weird spelling to it. So looks like Dave is on the precipice of striking first, Wiegand, that is, as David Whitley is really in a load of trouble here with his. Normally, we try to stay away from duplicated tiles in Scrabble. It really clogs up the flexibility of your rack. You don't have as many options. Every tile has its own unique attributes. So if you have a whole bunch of duplicated tiles, not only can you form slightly fewer words with them, but there's just fewer things that you can do on the board in an interesting way. So we hate those duplicated tiles, and David Whitley has 2 sets of duplicates and 1 of triplicates. So you guys are pointing out that that maybe onioned right here is a reasonable way to get out of this issue. That has its own problems, giving back the triple. So yeah, it's tough. This is a tough situation, but sometimes the tiles dictate that you have to make a 9-point play that opens up the board.
Yeah, he wants to play that onion somewhere, or that in ion, another more obscure word somewhere. But he's got the only place he can do it is with onion. I actually forgot that. It's a very high probability word. I kind of forgot that was acceptable. No matter what he does, by the way. Well, actually, onions would make Banshee a little tough to go down. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe. Unless it
would block amazingly. It would leave. It looks like it opens up the board so much. It has all these nice letters that you could play 8s through, but it would actually happen to block Dave's spot to play Banshee right here and would give nothing back. So we know that, but that's tough too.
Yes, of course. Dave also had the spot atop Roo. He could make Brew, or he could even make a Roo and bow. But David, he probably didn't see Onioned, is my guess. I mean, Onioned also had some drop. Yeah, Noni might be a better play. It might be a better play.
I agree. I think this is just a classic example of right decision by David Whitley, and it's just not going to work out for him, as it doesn't. It's going to continue to give Dave looks like only 1 spot for Banshee going down. There's nothing with any overlaps here. He would just have to use his S to pluralize Noni, which I'm sure he knows and is about to play. But I do like that decision by David Whitley, even though the leave was a little bit worse with ION instead of just IN. I like the decision. It's just not worked out for him here.
Yeah, I agree on second thought that O, the first O in Onioned, would have been in a very dangerous spot next to that triple letter. Lots of floating tiles for bingos. And yeah, Dave does, as you say, he knows that Noni is well, he might not know that it's a tree specifically, but it is a noun, even though it might look like a plural or something. It's a Noni or Noni is a singular noun, a tree, and pluralizes with an S. So he'll come down with that alternate spelling of Banshee, and he'll take an early lead. And we're over to Whitley with still some duplicate problems. He's drawn a second I and a second O, so he doesn't have a great rack. Again, to be honest, he's kind of muddling through some tough letters here. So yeah, I'd be looking for somewhere to maybe play bio or brio or something, or maybe use that double letter, double word combo next to Banshee, but there might not be a good way to do it while also shedding those duplicate vowels that you really, like you've explained really well. Well, those are going to clog up his rack for turns to come.
Yeah, it's agonizing from David Whitley's perspective to have the same problems that he would have hoped he would be done with after his last move. The really annoying thing is that this is just a really nice scoring spot. If you can put a good letter in this square, this is the only realistically hittable triple word score. You could potentially play down into this O, but that's much, much more difficult. So this stands out as a great place to play. Dave Wiegand, with all of his consonants, is very likely to hit that for a solid score with something like middle on his next turn. But David Whitley can't really do much about it. He's going to have to settle for something in the high teens or 20-ish points here, which that's not what he wants at this deficit. So not really sure what he's going to look to do. So one suggestion is Oribi right here, I think, or Oribi. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to say that. I think it's Oribi. That would at least block off access to this spot a little bit, prevent Dave from getting to it. We saw this word yesterday, Sam, buai. This could be another nice way to dump some of those vowels. Doesn't really open too much for himself, but it's just sort of a waiting move, keeping a decent leave of RIN. Or maybe he'll opt to play something like bio or boy in this spot right here with the brew hook. I don't really have a super strong preference for any of those options, but yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a little concerned about letting Dave Wiegand just get a huge crack at that spot. So maybe Oribi is a good way to mess with it.
Yeah, I think that's a great assessment. Well, it looks like David Whitley is considering just oboe, which I really don't love. It scores okay. He's thinking of it, I assume, parallel to Banshee. So it'll score okay, but those duplicate I's, if you've played Scrabble, at the competitive level, you know that duplicate I's are not good for the rack. And it's also setting up sort of a bit of a scoring spot it's using a scoring spot, but it's also setting one up for Wiegand. He's going to choose Bureau. I'd rather this over oboe. At least he's unduplicating himself. It's tough. On the one hand, he did use a few minutes. I think maybe some of those other options might have been a little bit better because this game's been really, I think it's been played very accurately up to this point, and he's leaving himself a little vowel heavy, and he's not scoring particularly well compared to, say, just bio or Oribi or buai. So it's a solid play, but maybe a slight missed opportunity, you could argue. And now Dave's going to have that option of middle. Wiegand, it's Dave. Wiegand's going to have that option.
It's tough. It's tough to keep these two Daves straight, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was a tough move. I think even if Bureau isn't, the engine approved move, it's very unlikely to be that far off of the move that would have, won a simulation or something like that in that position. It was really a position with a lot of crowded options right at the top, a lot of different ways you could go, none of which are incredibly inspiring. So I don't quibble with it too much. Not sure I would have played it, but at the same time, I'm not about to sit here and say that's going to be some kind of massive mistake by David Whitley. But over to Wiegand now, and I think the only reason that he wouldn't play something like middle very quickly here is he would love to find a play in that spot that keeps his E, the E being so useful to follow up with bingos in the future. And he's just making absolutely sure that he's not missing a move that keeps that tile. There really isn't anything through that I that keeps the E. He's doing his, making absolutely sure of that. He does have a couple other cool options if he wants them, like laded right here with all these overlaps that David Whitley just set up. Wiegand could play laded here for 37, but that leaves the CM combination compared to the AC combination after middle, which looks a little bit more flexible and balanced. So I like this play, Sam.
I agree. I think the reason he took those 2 minutes is to look for plays like laded. One could imagine some word that actually scores even more than laded and maybe uses up some of the higher point tiles that say starts at that double word score, maybe starts with the D, making bid, goes down, starts with DE, DEM or something, making nom. I don't think there was a word like that, but it would have scored really well, and it might have been worth playing something like that over middle. So my guess is just a hypothesis that Dave was taking a minute or two to Wiegand was taking a minute or two to look for those kinds of plays. Whitley's finally dug himself out of this, of all these duplicates. He's finally gotten a balanced rack. I guess his first rack was better than his subsequent two. So he's, of course, going to want to cash in this X for a good score if he can find it. Nothing immediately popping out to me. Yes, I'm also seeing in, not seeing anything immediately in chat. So, are there any options that pop out to you, Will?
Yeah, it's tough because the X is really, there's no obvious place to overlap with it. So I'm just, normally when you've got that X, you'd love to find a place to play it right here, right? So it's going to be extremely agonizing to have a decent spot even for the X to play, but no way of overlapping that effectively with it here, at least that I see. So that's frustrating. That being said, there is a pretty decent play for David of just Moxa right here. This is a cool play just because it leaves the EILN leave, which is a pretty solid leave. That's one that's going to turn into a bingo a fair amount of the time. Nice thing about Moxa as well is that it just opens up a little bit more space. This A is a line. If David can draw an S, he'll have that as a possibility. So that's at least worth consideration for him. Maybe it's what he's going to end up playing. If he really wants to go crazy, he could just play Max in the same spot, setting up his I in a way that's a little bit annoying to deal with. Of course, we see that Dave Wiegand has an I. And all right, a very different type of play entirely of just a Rue and Axe for David Whitley here, taking a bit of a point sacrifice, and the leave is not quite as good as some of these other options. So he's playing it safer. The game situation, Sam, makes me feel like he should be comfortable going a more aggressive route.
I agree. I think, when you're sort of a general principle, if you're losing, you don't want to be afraid of opening up the board aggressively. Sometimes even when you're winning, it's worth opening it up aggressively. But certainly when you're losing, you have an I. There's only, a few of the I's have been played so far. So you're obviously much more likely than Wiegand to use that maxi spot. So I think it would have been worth, you're going to bank 5 more points. So I wouldn't be afraid of setting up a spot when you're going to get those 5 extra points. I am seeing in the chat, maybe computer engines didn't mind that play of Bureau so much compared to Oribe. So I just want to give credit to Whitley. Maybe I was a little harsh on that play. Maybe a bit of a overjudgment with calling it an inaccuracy. But anyway, Wiegand is going to come down with Daoisi. So he's going to keep those duplicate A's actually. But this looks to me at first glance like a very Wiegand play. He's scoring well. He's not afraid of opening up some new letters. He's opening up a C. I mean, I guess a Y doesn't really do much, but he's not afraid of stringing some letters out there for his opponent to play through if he can score well and somewhat keep his rack, not totally unbalanced, I guess. Of course, he kept 2 A's. It's not a great balance. Did you have thoughts on that play, Will?
Yeah, it looks, I feel like at first glance, it looks like Dave is kind of opening the board with a lead, which sometimes you wouldn't want to do. But if you think about it, this E here, there's already an E open, so it's not giving anything new to David Whitley. This is a word that doesn't take an S hook on it, so you're not giving anything new back. There's already an S hook here. And it doesn't really give back. There is this one spot for scoring, but the C really makes it very difficult to do too much with it going down. Also, the X was just played, so you're not going to see a gigantic X play like locks come down in that spot anymore. So I think it's a relatively decent way for Dave Wiegand to get a lot of his imbalanced vowel heavy tiles off of his rack at once. And he has drawn a bunch of consonants to balance things out for him next turn. Meanwhile, Whitley is continuing to fight through this vowel overload. At some point, I predict he does have a balanced rack, but it's been very elusive for him so far this game.
Yeah, well, really well said about Dioisi. I think I sort of looked at it very in a cursory fashion, saying, "Oh, it's extending to a different part of the board," but the closer examination reveals that it's not such a risky play. Whitley, he briefly had a balanced rack, immediately drew OU after he had kept an O and an I. He's going to go with Oliak. Oh, that leave, though. OUN. It's tough because, this is the thing when you're playing Dave Wiegand. He's going to make accurate plays, and he's going to make them relatively quickly. You see, he's used about 7 minutes on, to take several turns. So for Whitley, he's trying to take a couple minutes to figure out, he's had difficult decisions. He hasn't had an easy bingo, an easy scoring play, barely all game. But he can't take too much time or he's going to find himself at a real loss for time. So Oliak immediately jumps out to me. I didn't even look for other options. I'm like, gosh, there must have been something better, but it's hard to fault him when he's in a time crunch. Not really a time crunch, but he's, Wiegand sort of plays the clock game well, I think. At least when I've played him, I've always found him, it's
yeah.
Whitley's thinking about his decisions. It's not like he's playing these moves instantly. He's taking a minute or two, and he's sort of playing the best thing he sees, I think.
Yeah, I can speak to Dave's speed as a player. So, like, when you watch Dave play, you can just look. He's almost like a statue, kind of staring at his tiles, moving very slowly. Inside that noggin of his is absolutely lightning fast processing of words and the board state. So even though he's kind of moving slow at the table, you look up at the clock and you see that you're 6 minutes behind him pretty fast, even though when he puts his words onto the board, he's moving at a very measured pace. Nothing feels rushed. So very, very normal to see Dave ahead on the clock here. Oliak, I mean, the challenge of that play for David Whitley is, having to give up that E. The E is so important to get those next bingos down. He left something like OUN or something like that, either OUT or
OUN. That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, there again, another situation just like Biro, where I don't think there was going to be an option that was significantly better than the play that he chose. But I think some of these tiny little details between plays do end up mattering from time to time. I'm not 100% sure what I would have picked in David Whitley's shoes. But even something like, just using one of his O's in this spot somehow, maybe just playing something parallel here, leaving much of the board open. Maybe that's a slightly better way to go than, plays up here would score, I think, 20-ish compared to the 14 of Oliak, and you would be able to keep your E as well. So
Chat points out that at the very least, Whitley had Leuco, Leuco, which I believe is an adjective, and though it does take an N, I believe.
He would have had.
Of course, that would have been a he had an N actually, right?
So he could setting
up his N. But surely that would have been an improvement because generally the I is a much more useful letter than the U. It's just in more words. It's easier to make a bingo with an I. ION, by the way, is sort of you've kind of got a suffix going there. Over to we, but again, maybe that word is not an instant find. I believe it's a Collins only word. It's not formed in a sort of a usual way that it's not the easiest word to spot, I don't think, Leuco. So I just want to emphasize the difficulty of playing a tough opponent like Dave Wiegand, who chooses the word lair-up, which was suggested in the chat. And he, about half this game has progressed, and neither of the blanks are out. So there's a little bit of extra value in using up more tiles because now you get extra chances to pick one of those two blanks. Yeah, I don't know what to make of this play. I haven't looked at the options closely, but seems like a solid play of layer up, and Willie's going to come right back with HAEN, unduplicating his N and scoring decently.
Yeah, continued very difficult positions for Whitley. I do think that Larup is a very, very savvy move on the part of Dave Wiegand. Just think about it from his perspective. He's up by, I guess now after this H play right here, he's up by a little bit. He's 81 points. So enough that a bingo through something like the E would be pretty bad. But what does Larup do? If you imagine this play is not on the board, it blocks off this lane, which is probably even heavier hitting than the E of middle. It also blocks the S of Banshee in one go, and it uses 6 tiles to try to draw one of the 2 blanks which have yet to be played. So there were options that Dave Wiegand could have played right here on the previous turn, but I like the idea to play Larup, using a few more tiles and blocking a little bit more of the board in the process. As with all, and you can see he had 4 A's on his previous move, using 2 of them on that last play for 18 points and pulling a blank in the process. And this is where Dave Wiegand really shines. Sam, it's actually incredible how good Dave Wiegand has gotten with the blanks. You can see it on the word study site, aerolith.org, courtesy of Cesar del Solar, another top expert from the US. A lot of players use that site, including the both of us, and Dave Wiegand's scores on the blank challenges are absolutely bonkers every day.
If there's a bingo in here, using that blank, he'll probably find it based on what we see on Aerolith, based on his scores. Yeah, and he's also gotten stronger. I think he's always been seen as that sort of aggressive bingo finding machine. I think in recent years, I've heard players say, Wiegand's really gotten stronger at the tactical, strategic, the tactical parts of Scrabble and the strategic parts of Scrabble, where he's blocking off lanes, he's playing defense. And we can see that his last 2 plays have really obstructed the board. Outseen might have fit, maybe under Oliek or over Oliek, not anymore. So now Whitley is he's finally got that bingo and he's just staring at it and there's nowhere to put it. And he's down by 100 points. And, he hasn't, to me, this is like a textbook game of Dave Wiegand playing like an expert level player, but not sort of a super elite player where you haven't done anything. Maybe you haven't made any massive blunders, you haven't missed any bingos, and you look up and you're down by 100 points and your bingo's not fitting anywhere. And he has drawn some really clunky racks, of course. He's drawn duplicates and triplicates all game, but yeah, it's going to be another tough turn, honestly. And Whitley's been faced with a lot of tough decisions. You can kind of see it in his body language. He's shaking his head like, what's going on? Like, am I playing that badly? Why? What's going on with these letters?
Yeah, it's really the tiles have not been there for David Whitley for sure. He's had some very tricky decisions to make with duplicated tiles, all these low point tiles that don't actually yield any bingos on this board. But yeah, to your point about Dave Wiegand, it feels like he is the strongest version of himself right now. It's kind of disturbing to think about somebody with his word knowledge and just board vision, end game skills, really making that next leap into a top level strategist capable of playing on closed and open boards both. Used to be very, very comfortable and would be sort of relentless in his pursuit of an open board. I don't really detect that quite as much on his part in recent years, which just makes him all the more disturbing of an opponent to play against. And we see David Whitley play ET right there. It scores decently. Maybe he's hoping that if he draws a bingo with a U in it, both of the words that he's just played actually hook with a U. That being said, in general, the U isn't a tile that you want to keep when you're trying for bingo. So yes, even though this is a good move to make and maximize the value of your U, I might have liked to see David either try to use that U right now. A couple people pointed out a play like Loon right here, scoring decently, obstructing the E a little bit, but at this score, David really wants to hit this E going all the way up, so Loon doesn't block that. Maybe even just a simple play like OE right here is a nice way to score a few points and leave slightly better balance, making sure you're keeping one of those consonants on your rack instead of using it. Either way, another very difficult situation. And it is back to Dave, who doesn't have a bingo, but man, he has an incredibly stylish play. And this is where Dave shines if he's able to spot it here.
Yeah, so the chat is pointing out, specifically, I think Rob Rubinski in the chat is pointing out ADYTA. I won't hazard a guess at the pronunciation, but that is, yes, thanks, Will, for your telestration. Oh, he's missed it, though. This is maybe the first mistake. I think we can say this is a mistake that we've seen all game from the man who's nicknamed Dr. Bing for his bingo prowess. He's played Yad, a Collins only word, which is not a bad play, certainly. He's using his double A. You like to get rid of that Y. Oh my God, he has drawn.
Look at his draw.
Q blank. I mean, QU blank is a pretty good draw, and it's really good when you've already got another blank, because you are going to bingo, and you're going to bingo for a lot of points. He is going to bingo down to that E for 100 plus. He's going to bingo on the second to bottom row of this board under X. So, you know, this is game over, certainly, when you're having a rack like that. With this looks like an aerolith quiz where you got 15. Well, he's going to be cycling through all the possibilities, probably trying to even put that Q on the double letter score and the triple word score. Meanwhile, Whitley just fishes his J. He's trying to get that first bingo, his first bingo of the game. But wow, yeah, that's quite a draw.
Yeah, no shortage of options for Dave with that amazing draw that you're referring to. There are a handful of options. Of course, for Dave, he's going to take a little time and try to find something that hits the Q on that square going down. That is what is going to yield the absolute jackpot of points in this position. There actually isn't anything we can tell you that slots the Q in that spot. A lot of you in the chat pointing out some of the other options that he does have: equative, pratique, quartile, quantize, a ton of options. I would point out, though, there is a pretty cool extra option, Sam, if he wants to go crazy with it. Umiak right here, burning just one of his two blanks, keeping the second one in reserve for 75 points. That's actually a pretty solid option for him here. Probably it's fine just to get the 98 points on offer in the upper right of the board, but tempting to play Umiak as well.
You say, when do you ever pass up a 98-point play in Scrabble? Well, the answer might be when you have a 75-point play that retains the blank. It's actually, I do think if he just wants to guarantee the win, he probably will want to just play one of the many words to that top right triple word score, because he's taking, really an insurmountable lead. Even if Whitley bingos back, as he will bingo back with a word like outness. I don't think that fits, but I think tonuses will fit, hooking Fen and Latu. Even if Whitley bingos back, it's going to give back some counterplay for Wiegand, unless he draws complete dreck, like 7 consonants or something. So I don't know. Actually, Umiak, I don't know. I mean, either way, it's hard to see him losing the game after Umiak as well, to be honest. I mean, he's going up by, 170-something points, keeping the blank, which is really nice to bail yourself out of tough situations. But And then also it might be better to try to build that spread up. His spread is, in the double digits, and he might want to try to build it up so he can have the tiebreaker later in the tournament. So I don't have a particular, now it looks like he's looking at pratique perhaps.
Yeah.
Using his trophy as a P and his beer as an R.
Nice.
So yeah, do you have a preference between those two massive options?
Yeah, I mean, in situations like that, the thing you have to do is start looking at the unseen tiles. You need to think about, if I don't play my 98-point bingo, what are my chances of actually drawing the good stuff that I need to bingo on the next turn? So what you're looking for is how many of those high point tiles are left. And this looks kind of like a mostly low point set of tiles. You do have the Z and the V lurking, but most of the other tiles are decent for bingo. So that could tip the scales a little bit in favor of Umiak, but I really do not quibble with this choice at all. Even if Dave saw Umiak, I think of this as at most a coin flip, and maybe playing Pratique is just better to get the extra points right now. Of course, you see David Whitley playing Tonuses absolutely instantaneously, so good job to him spotting his bingo and the spot for it. But even after the exchange, Dave Wiegand working out much better with his 98-point bingo compared to David Whitley's 78.1. Not a great draw for Dave, though. Not sure if this actually represents any kind of threat to him. I think he'll surely be able to just look at the board, Sam. Like after a play, well, man, it's kind of scary.
Scared. I'm a little.
Tonus has
up by 113 points. It's scarier than usual because, I mean, what can he really? I guess Rit. Play Rit. And just RITT, because I just want to. Gosh, I don't know, because you've got that Z out there. I mean, of course, we see Whitley has drawn complete Drek, totally clunky letters that aren't going to form any words, but you have to worry about a triple through the T. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off, Will, but it's a tough.
Not at all.
It's a vaguely worrying situation.
Yeah,
well,
it's
not
crazy.
To Dave Wiegand.
Dave's not going to worry. So the beauty of Tonuses is that it made two threats to address, one of which is a little bit more realistic, but a triple through the T is basically the only thing that could really stop Dave from winning this game. So maybe a play like you suggested, Sam, of just RITT was warranted through that T, even though it left absolutely atrocious tiles. Because if David Whitley, I should say, managed to draw something through that T, that would be one hell of a way to lose a game here.
Yeah, at the same time, I understand this play of Trig. Realistically speaking, this game is all but clinched. So he doesn't want to sacrifice too much spread. He doesn't want to give easy access. Well, I mean, either triple word could yield easy plays. So I don't know. I mean, by the way, going back to that Pratique play, it is, even for Dave Wiegand, it is possible he didn't notice Umiak. It's a notoriously hard word to see. And also he had so many options to try to figure out. He was trying to put that Q on that double letter. He had two blanks. Everyone knows, well, it's very difficult to find words with two blanks. It's just a lot to iterate through. And maybe he was trying to somehow put the Q on the triple letter in a bingo at the bottom. So anyway, may have been an intentional decision over Umiak. He also might have not seen Umiak. Umiak kind of feels like his style of going for the max score and using all of his high point or using all of his valuable tiles to the max effect. But yeah, this game is sort of going to end how it's gone the whole way, because with 4 letters left in the bag, well, Wiegand's got a reasonably balanced rack. He's going to be able to probably use his Z somewhere, I assume, for a decent play. And Whitley is just stuck with Drek, and it's too late to exchange. So
Yeah, agreed. There comes lose for 32. Looks like really the only realistic way to use the Z on a triple or a good bonus square. Makes a lot of sense from Dave. And David Whitley is. We should talk a little bit about his previous play of down in the corner, kind of throwing up the white flag of a play there by David Whitley to just grab the points in this area. But note that, from David Whitley's perspective, and as was actually the case, he did block very big Z plays through that tee of Tonus's by playing of. So he might have saved himself a little extra damage in that spot by throwing up the white flag there. But yeah, always tough to be in that situation.
Yeah, I think it's a good decision. You have to look at your situation realistically, and his letters were so clunky that I don't, without maybe unless there was some big option that I missed, I can't imagine that there was any way that he could have shed enough of his clunky tiles to even threaten something on the triple. And even if he, miraculously could have threatened something, Dave Wiegand would have surely blocked the spot. He's going to notice that's the only threat on the board. So it's time to change gears, say, this game's over. How do I enhance my spread? And in this case, like you said, well, it's just playing a little defense. And as bad as the situation is, giving up a 69-point play of ZD, that alternate spelling ZITE, that's going to be even worse for your spread.
Yeah, for sure. So just an understanding that the tournament is longer than just one game. This is why, as you said, Sam, at the outset of the broadcast, this is why we play 31 games in an event like this. Each individual game does have its ebbs and flows and ups and downs, but it is typically the players who make the best decisions over the long haul, even in the games where they're winning by a ton and losing by a ton. You'll see players like that end up at the top of the standings when all is said and done, much of the time. Not all of the time, but much of the time. I think that it is. I don't know, Sam. Where do you put the luck factor in Scrabble as like how big of a consideration it is?
Well, of course, I've heard this sort of folk wisdom of 50% of games are in the middle, and 25% is going to go for one person and 25% for another. Of course, if you have you can sort of look at the results from these long tournaments and you can kind of get a sense of how much luck is involved. I mean, like I just said, Dave Wiegand has finished in the top 10 in his last 6 world championships, right? So obviously and my favorite sort of point about the luck is Nigel Richards and some of his amazing streaks of winning 3 out of 4 world championships, I believe. And I think something like 4 out of 5 US national championships. So of course there's a lot of luck, and then Nigel came right back and finished like 16th. So you've got to imagine he didn't have the best letters that year. There's luck in Scrabble, but I always love to, focus on the plays, focus on the decisions, right? Like people talk about luck a lot. Like at least I've found when you go to the tournaments, people are always saying, I draw a lot of U's or whatever. And it's just, you can try to optimize each decision. And we look at someone like Dave Wiegand. I mean, gosh, he played this game so well. Really, he played, to my mind, really nearly perfectly or so, as far as I could tell without, the benefit of doing a computer analysis, until he played Yod. And he had already drawn the blank with Yod, maybe sort of psychologically. You've got the blank, you're already up by 100 points or whatever. You sort of think you're ready to, you're ready to get in there for victory, and you're not, maybe you overlook a play. But anyway, it's sort of a rambling answer to your question, Will. I think it's a game of luck. It's a game of skill. And, we can't really you can't do much about the luck, and at least not in any legal way. So let's try to focus on the skill, because the players like Dave Wiegand and Nigel Richards and yourself who have focused on the skill well, you can get some really great results and relatively consistent results. You can't win every tournament. It's impossible, but yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah, a lot there. In general, I would just add that as a player, thinking about that stuff is kind of unproductive. I think that there's so much to think about on a turn in, turn out basis that if you can manage to stop thinking about the tiles, that's going to end up allowing you to focus a little bit more on the stuff that actually helps you make better decisions over the board, which is way easier said than done. So yeah, from David Whitley's POV here, hopefully he can come away from this game realizing this game was probably not his to win, and that he really, there are a couple moves where maybe we would have gone a different direction, but nothing egregious by any means. And you just ran up against a world-class player, drawing very well and playing very savvy plays on the part of Dave Wiegand. So we see Plum going down. Nice play by David Whitley. I think that was actually his best play to start off this end game. Dave Wiegand, Sam, is an end game master. He's so good at making the right plays in the end game. I'm curious how he's gonna. This is a tough end game position with no obvious place to score points at all. So I'm not really sure how he's going to navigate this.
Yeah, endgame. I love endgames. I think they're so fun. I always try, almost always, even at the club, even when it doesn't matter and the game's over like this. I just like to try, though. Of course, you don't want to. Sometimes you can burn too much energy thinking through these things, but yeah, I guess I'd be looking for, if we want to give this one a look. Is Whitley? Does he have anywhere for his nogs or his snog? I don't see anywhere because. Not that Plum wasn't a good play, but it doesn't look like it goes anywhere. So Wiegand can sort of just focus on going out into it. It looks like that's what he's doing, unless I'm missing something. He's just, as little as Tree scores, it might have been one of his better scoring plays on the interior of the board. And then certainly his et can go in several places. So did he have a better option there, Will, if you're running this through the engine?
So the funny thing about playing Tree here, or any other play that sort of obstructs this area of the board, is that David Whitley's best play was Kuzin through all these tiles already on the board. So Tree blocks that, forces him to play IOs if he's going to play for the highest scoring move. That would be, let me make sure that I give Dave his credit for Tree here. Before we move on, he's at 433, I believe. There we go. So then after IOs, which I wrote on the board, now Dave would be able to respond with Kiter for 11. He does have another space to play his ENT for 11 as well. So that's the sequence that Dave came up with, which is pretty impressive. No outplays for David Whitley. So Dave Wiegand is going to get one more turn to collect a couple extra points. So yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Doing end games properly takes a lot of brain power. I also get into the habit of maybe burning more brain power than I should, just because I like solving them to the best of my ability. I wish I were better at it. It would maybe justify the amount of energy that I spend on that. But it is it's almost like a totally different skill set unto itself, with only some of the same themes applying from the rest of the game to the end game.
Yeah, I do love some of these end games. Maybe some folks have seen. I'm guessing you've seen the two French folks who, as the game's over, and we do end with Wiegand plays his et. Whitley just plops his S, and so maybe a couple points less than IO's, and it's going to be a solid win for Wiegand. But there have been some really interesting ones on that French website. I think it's a top French player, French language player, and a top, I Oh, and it looks
Yeah,
like
just
they're chatting. So maybe we want to. I don't know if we want to switch to the overhead mic, and I'll stop rambling about end games.
yeah. Let's see what they have to say.
3-3-3 is right.
Yep.
Right. That was a tough game.
The worst was that turn. I could have played onion. I had I-O-O-N-N.
Ooh, yuck.
Yeah, I left I-N after a week, and I do I-O-N-N-O. So onion might have worked better, but I was a little afraid.
Like you were really struggling.
Yeah, and then I got all the vowels and had nothing but consonants at the end. I was happy that I saw that fit, because I saw the two bingos right away, and I just thought, too bad.
I'm not sure where he was thinking of playing onion. Maybe onion.
Really, I mean,
Yeah, I think he meant onion.
it really is hard to be on stream, because like at the beginning, I was taking probably more time than I normally would.
Make a stupid.
Because you're thinking, oh, you should have spent more time on that turn, and then later they're going, I should have left more time at the end.
Oh, we're trying to be nice, David.
And then I was taking time and going, the reason I'm taking time is because I can't find a single good play.
It's tough. It's tough.
It is tough.
I mean, that's what I think to myself after my games. Gosh, I spent too much time on this play, and I didn't spend enough time on that play.
Yeah.
But all you have is one pointers, and they're mostly vowels. What are you supposed to do?
He did play pretty well through those.
I agree. For the record, David Whitley played a solid game in very difficult circumstances. So hopefully, if he watches this ever after the fact, I can hear that.
I thought of playing Eloin, but it's like blocking things up, not in a crappy lead anyway. I kept trying at the end to find something with an LY, but couldn't make anything work.
Yeah, I had like ZI, but I didn't have a T yet, and then of course I drew TT after playing QSE.
All right. Well, I think the players have gotten their discussion out of their system there. This is not a game where Dave has to say too much from his point of view. A lot of those decisions were relatively clear, although Dave is also very, very humble guy, Sam. I think if he wanted to, he could talk about some interesting decisions that he made in this game, but ultimately it was certainly Wiegand's game to win here in round 8.